Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here, and we will be discussing in this series of biblical events decoded, can we find peace in this world, or are we doomed to an anxiety-ridden life? An important question. This program is dedicated by the Pack family in loving memory of Malka Baschana upon her 11th yahrzeit. Maria da Vinci was a Holocaust survivor and a woman of courage. Despite losing over 100 members of her family, she came to this country with her husband and built a successful business, family, and supported Jewish causes around the world as her life's mission. Her self-fulfilling optimism, generosity, and love for Kol Yisrael and Klal Yisrael and Torah shines through to this day. And that indeed is one of the ways of how we counter and resolve anxiety in this world. So I remember a class I gave many years ago. It was a cardiologist who attended. He would attend quite often, my weekly class. Very, very sweet soul, beautiful, refined person. But he had an anxiety-ridden life, a very difficult life. One day, he was at wit's end, and he said to me, "Can you please pray for me? Please, one day of peace, one day of calm." And we had a close relationship, so I said to him, "Do you mean like a flat line?" He said, No. He laughed. As we know, cardiologist, a cardiogram, a flat line is not what you want. A flat line is essentially a dead heart. A cardiogram looks like this: waves, peaks and valleys. That's life, constant movement, the pulsating movement. What you don't want to have is the peaks to be too high and the valleys too low. A balanced heartbeat, contraction, expansion, but nonetheless a heartbeat, a pulse. So if you think of life itself is defined by movement. And movement means that you're not static, and you're not stuck, and you're never in one place. Even saying I'm happy is not a static state. You're constantly in flux and constantly in move. And just like the seasons go from the winter to the spring, to the summer, to the autumn, and the same thing with everything in existence, there is no such thing as an inanimate universe. Today we know everything is pulsating with energy. If it's not visible to the eye, it's on the microscopic level. So life is movement, and movement always means there's going to be change. The question is how we address change. Does change disrupt our lives? Does it cause upheaval? Does it create anxiety? That's what we want to talk about. Because for many, life seems synonymous with anxiety. Life seems synonymous with pain. It doesn't mean you're always painful, but it means there's always that potential. And you have anxiety when you don't have an anxiety. Like, when is it coming next? That type of thing. Like the guy that says, I'm worried about being fired even though I wasn't hired. So many see life in that way. The unknown curveballs. Especially if you have been hurt, and especially if you've gone through difficult challenges in life, then it becomes more expected. So let's go back to a story in the Bible. We're talking about biblical events in the Bible that we read these weeks. Story of Jacob. If you talk about an anxiety-filled life, Jacob. Not only was it anxiety-filled, from the moment that he was conceived in pregnancy, him and his twin brother were already at each other's throats. Not literally, but figuratively. As we're told, they struggled in their mother's womb and caused her a lot of pain. Two nations are inside of you, two archetypes. We've discussed this in previous weeks, what this battle was about, but it was a battle. And as they're born, very different personalities there again, like alter egos, in every possible way. So from the youngest age, then of course, the confrontations that Jacob has with his brother Esau. And after that, even when he runs away from him, for 20 years now he's dealing with his deceitful, crooked, lying uncle Laban. And after 20 years there, he finally comes home And there Esav is ready to confront him in war. So they do reconcile, at least partially. But it never ends. So you would think, okay, finally comes the story. He comes back home. It says that he settles in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan, as it was called. Vayeshev, the Hebrew word, which means to settle, peaceful. Yeshiva, to settle in, calm, relaxed, tranquil. No, it would not be. His 7th-year-old son, his unique son, his special son, his favorite son, Joseph, evokes the jealousy of his brothers, and they decide to plot, conspire, and kill him. They don't end up killing him, they end up selling him into slavery. But they tell their father he was killed. To another 22 years, losing a son. No one should ever know what that pain is like. Why? So we're told that Jacob felt now the time has come, and he wanted to live in peace and tranquility. You cannot live in peace and tranquility. So the Joseph story. Finally, 22 years later, the last 17 years of his life, from 130 to 147, in Egypt, he finally has some peace, 17 years, called good years. But when Pharaoh asks him, how old are you? And he said, 147 years. I lived short and painful years. So he, in a sense, personifies a certain way, a life of anxiety, a life of difficulty. So we can learn much from that in our own personal lives. So let's begin. So first of all, why does it have to be that way? Why can't life be a straight line? A straight line that obviously keeps us alive. Why does it have to have the twists and turns and the ups and downs and the exhaling and the inhaling and the contraction and expansion? And the answer is getting back to the very purpose of existence. Purpose of existence is not to create puppets or robots that are just living out a predetermined script. We control and define our destinies. And as such, definition of life is one that's going to be in flux. That's called mobility, movement. And we're part of that movement. We are the ones that navigate. We don't control the circumstances that happen in our lives. Things can happen. You're out at sea and there's a storm. You don't control whether there'll be a storm. But how you're going to navigate the storm makes all the difference. A good swimmer will know how to navigate, will not fight the tide, will relax, will go with the flow when need to be. A bad swimmer will fight the tide, drain their strengths, and who knows what can happen. So it's about navigation, and life is navigation. And to make life meaningful, life is not going to be one color, one flavor. It's filled with diversity. The richness and beauty of life is its diversity, and diversity, by definition, means influx. But flux does not necessarily equate with anxiety. Flux means there's changes. Navigation is the key to life. So to say, let's freeze that moment of bliss or freeze that moment of joy. Yeah, for the moment it may be very good, but that's not what life is about. Life is about continuous movement, continuous growth, and growth by definition will also include setbacks. But not to see setback as an end in itself, but to see it as a springboard that propels you to the next level of growth. That's what life is about. And that's why there's change. It's not change in order to cause restlessness, to cause anxiety, to cause upheaval. It's change in order to cause growth, to catapult us to new levels. So it's all about our attitude. So that's lesson number one. That you have the choice whether it's going to cause you to be anxious or it's going to cause you to motivate you to grow. There's a difference between anxiety and angst. In a healthy human being, a restless spirit is a good thing. That means that you're alive. You're like a flickering flame. The soul is compared to a flame. You're always restless. Animal bliss is not sufficient. So even though when you're very busy, you're dreaming about being on a beach and just relaxing, try it out for too long. Well, some people get used to that too. But the human nature abhors the concept of just being a couch potato, doing nothing. Movement, growth. This doesn't mean we have to run and be running all the time. We have hours of sleep, of respite, of relaxation. But that's also part of the movement. Just like a contraction and expansion complement each other. So bottom line is that the whole idea of life is that type of movement, and embracing that is the key. Anxiety is when it becomes your enemy, when these forces are becoming something that you see as an adversary. Seeing it as an opponent you have to contend with, instead of learning how to navigate it. So understanding that concept is actually the key to real growth, because then every situation is an opportunity, even what may seem like a setback. However, we have to address, of course, the bigger issue. What about things that happen in our lives, not in our control, that are filled with cause for anxiety? Terrible tragedy, God forbid, trauma, losses. Case of Jacob, in his mind, the death of his son. It's not something, I'll just navigate through it. This touches to the deepest core of who we are, our beings. It shakes us up. Why could he not have some peace in that regard? You can say, okay, fine, the need for movement, but to that extent, how do we explain that? So firstly, we don't explain everything. There's mysteries in life we'll never understand. Why some people suffer more than others. Why innocent people suffer. These are the million-dollar questions that we don't have answers for. Silence is sometimes the only answer. But we don't ask the question why. We ask, what are we going to do about it? Because even then, there's something you can do. So I'm not here to justify that type of anxiety. But let's take it a step further. Why did Jacob not be blessed after everything he went through? And the answer is because he's not alone. He's a leader. And a leader is bound with the people around him. Yes, it would be very nice if you can say, I cut myself off from the world around me, the world of despair and suffering and pain and all the loss out there, and I create my own bubble, my own oasis. But that too is not the purpose of life. We are part of a full reality. One of the reasons we break a glass, the Jewish ceremony of a wedding, under the chuppah, why do we break a glass? What's significant breaking a glass? If anything, you're building a new family, a new couple coming together, a new union. We should be building. Why are they breaking a glass? So one of the reasons is to remind us of the destruction of the temple. But that doesn't answer the question. That just makes the question even stronger. Of all times, the high point of a person's life is that moment, the ceremony. Life will face challenges. Marriage has its challenges. But here, let them celebrate. Why do you have to remind them, hey, just for the record, hey, no, there was a destruction out there? And the answer is because we're not alone. If you want to really experience joy in this world, joy comes with humility. Not with saying, okay, we're happy and everyone else we cut out of our lives. We remember that even as we're at our highest point in joy, we remember there's still some broken hearts out there. There's still a broken structure. There's still dissonance. There's schisms, rifts that need to be repaired. And my marriage and union is not just for me and my spouse, but also to help repair the world. So we remember, it's a humble act. And when you remember in your high point of joy and ecstasy, the brokenness that exists in existence, then when you go through sometimes a setback, you will also be remembered. It also won't be total. You'll see people who celebrate 100% also grieve 100%. You always need to know it's like a cycle, like a Ferris wheel. As one great mystic put it, the Ferris wheel of life. When you're all the way on the top, rest assured it will turn. And when you're at the bottom, rest assured it will turn again. It's movement. So you never lock yourself in, even in the high point, and say, that's all I have. No, on the contrary, by remembering that there's a broken glass, there's something broken in this world, that completes you. That's why there's an expression, there's nothing as complete as a broken heart. Because it's part of life is to be complete. And complete doesn't just mean perfection and beauty. It also means embracing that which sometimes doesn't seem so perfect. The cracks of life, where the light gets in. So to go back to Jacob, so the story of his anxiety is the story of the anxiety of existence, existential loneliness, the existential pain, the existential cracks in existence. So yes, it would have been beautiful, and we all pray that Jacob should have had peace. But it wasn't to be because the world was not at peace yet. If the world would be at peace, he also would be at peace. And indeed, Jacob used those years, he navigated. He didn't just fall down and die. He was in pain. He felt the loss. But he built, and he built further built. And then ultimately when he reunited with Joseph and all the brothers reunited, you had a taste of what would be true harmony and true tranquility. It wasn't meant to be permanent. Then came the exile, the Egyptian exile. But ultimately it helped create and repair some rifts that ultimately would create a unity. And we firmly believe that the world will come to a point of harmony. But harmony is not a contradiction to change. It's not a contradiction to shifts. So the 2 points that we have to take away and remember is that the movements of life are not the cause for anxiety. They could be the cause, especially when a person becomes a sense of entitlement, a sense of arrogance. They feel, hey, it's not working my way, and you start fighting the changes. Why? It's not fair. I don't deserve. When you embrace and you allow yourself to navigate these shifts, then instead of anxiety, you have growth. And the second point to remember that we are responsible for each other. So though that doesn't mean that every person who has anxiety has to cause us to have anxiety, but we have to remember, don't be completely separate. What are you doing to bring healing to the world? Are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Because we're not alone. Indeed, that very cycle really affects all of existence. All the subatomic particles, all the DNA, all the strings are all connected in an invisible quilt. So when one person is hurting, we're all hurting. So if there's some restlessness or anxiety in one place, there's restlessness and anxiety in other places. You have to build your strength, build your peace and harmony, and make sure that it spills over the ripple effect, the butterfly effect on the others and the people around you. So it's about holding strong and recognizing that when you are bound above, you don't fall below. So even though there are ups and downs, twists and turns, but you're following, you're navigating because you have a compass and you have a destination. And the destination is to create harmony within the diversity, to find that balance, the contraction-expansion balance. That's one heartbeat and many heartbeats. The music of life, the poetry of life, which is the changes, but that flow in a fluid way and create unbelievable music. In the wrong order, it creates noise, turbulence, annoyance. But in the right order, it creates beauty because it's taking all the different pieces as they move in different directions. And instead of creating discord, and creating and chaos and conflict, they create harmony. My friends, these are some of the lessons we learn from Jacob about the concept of finding peace in this world. So the true peace is actually being at peace with the fact that life is not just one movement. Being at peace with no peace. But not no peace, not as an anxiety, but no peace as in the constant striving, pining, longing for greater heights. That's not a contradiction. You're not at peace, you don't have animal bliss. But you're at peace with the fact that movement is a necessity in life. And that's the combination of having total peace with the fact that life will always be in movement. And then movement is actually part of the peace, not part of the anxiety. May everybody be blessed with a minimal amount of reasons to be anxious. Only beautiful, harmonious experiences. But when you do have some of the shakeups and some of the shifts and changes and some of the uncertainties that we all face, especially lately, let it propel us to greater heights of certainty and greater heights of learning how to navigate and realize that all of these are waves that help us become far greater than we ever could have imagined. Be blessed, be well. This has been Simon Jacobson, meaningfullife.com. This and all our programs can be found at meaningfullife.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your comments, suggestions, and of course, please share. Let's keep the wave. Let's keep the pulsating wave pulsating from one corner of the world to the next. Be well and be blessed. Thank you.